November the 7th, 2023. Guys, the information coming in from Israel, and this is something that I've been watching because we've seen the nations around Israel start turning against it, and even nations that are not right there around them in the UK, all over the world really, because of the constant bombardment of the civilians that are in Gaza. Now, there's over 10,400, something like that, now have been killed. There are over 4,000 children, and you're getting reports every day of continuing bombardment. What the countries are trying to do, as well as the United Nations and WHO, are trying to get a temporary ceasefire and create a humanitarian corridor out of there and maybe get some supplies in. But yesterday, Jordan did something. They got with Israel, and I think they've been semi-friendly for quite a few years. Maybe just in the need for peace in the region, but anyway, they've had good communications. Now, Jordan flew over one of their big planes over the Gaza Strip yesterday and dropped relief packages. I think it was both food, water, medicine. I don't know what all was in it, but they had agreed, the Israeli Air Force had agreed to let them do that. But now this morning, Jordan is coming out and condemning Israel. Jordan is leaving all options open in its response to what it says is Israel's failure to distinguish between military and civilian targets in its intensified shelling and ground operations in the Gaza Strip. At the same time, it emphasizes that any attempt to expel the Palestinians, I think they're talking about into Jordan, it's translated, is a red line that is equivalent to a declaration of war. They're saying that Jordan is leaving all options open in its response to what it says is Israel's failure to distinguish between military and civilian targets in its intensified shelling and ground operations in the Gaza Strip. At the same time, he emphasizes that any attempt to expel the Palestinians into Jordan is a red line that is equivalent to a declaration of war. Now, their prime minister did not specify what measures his country might take. This is days after it recalled its ambassador from Israel in protest at Israeli operations in Gaza following a Hamas attack, again back on October 7th. I think it's been a month today. Jordan also announced last week that Israel's ambassador, who fled Amman, that's Jordan, shortly after the Hamas attack, would not be allowed to return to the country and resume his duties, effectively declaring him an undesirable person. All options are on the table in terms of our response to Israel's attack on Gaza and its consequences. So Jordan had signed a peace treaty with Israel back in 1994. Guys, if I'm not mistaken, someone there may know more about it, but wasn't Jordan almost in charge of policing the Dome of the Rock there in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, that area? And it says the siege of the densely populated enclave is not self-defense, as Israel claims. The brutal Israeli attack does not discriminate, again, between civilian and military targets and extends to safe areas and ambulances, he stressed. Jordan is reviewing its economic and political ties with Israel and is even considering suspending further steps to implement the peace deal if the bloodshed in Gaza worsens. Israel's war with Hamas has raised fears in the country that Israel will seize the opportunity to expel Palestinians en masse from the occupied West Bank, where settler attacks on Palestinian residents have increased since October 7th. Foreign Minister Ayman al-Safadi said any attempt to expel Palestinians in Jordan was a red line tantamount to a declaration of war. And guys, this to me was a major problem that was about to happen. I was waiting to see how long Jordan would hold out and try to maintain some type of relationship with Israel. But now they're saying the Jordanian army has already reinforced its positions along the border. Also in the news, you're looking at Putin. You're also looking at the leader of the Libyan military. They control a lot of the southern Mediterranean. And there's been concern on the Russian side that the buildup of the U.S. Navy and other navies in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea was more of a direct threat to them than it was a help to Israel. In other words, they want to control the Mediterranean. And if you look out into the Mediterranean west of Israel, you've got the Leviathan, natural gas and oil production systems there, some of the largest in the world. So Putin is setting himself up with naval bases that can shut down that area, as well as the Suez, those areas. And the article says this defense agreement between Putin and Haftar could set up Russian naval bases in Libya together with Algeria. They close the entry and exit to the Mediterranean Atlantic Ocean. So they're set up not only for themselves to have the oil and gas, but to shut down imports and exports, and choke off the rest of the world if they want, and control everything. This has a lot to do with that, and on the U.S. side, it has a lot to do with these nations that you're looking at are all getting away from the petrodollar. That always starts a war in the Middle East. It says the standing strategic goal of the USA is going for a walk. Moscow is forming the axis of resistance in Africa. Now, Bloomberg is saying that a deal between Putin and Haftar for a Russian naval or air base in eastern Libya, this defense deal has alarmed Washington for several reasons. First, Turkey controls western Libya and Russia controls eastern Libya. The two countries fly outside of France, Italy, and U.S. They're not very far from Greece and that complete group of southern Europe or European nations there. It says Russia and Turkey will expand the control in the Sahel zone. We remind you that recently France, as well as the U.S., began to withdraw from a series of countries in Africa, such as Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, etc. We covered that. Russian ships will be literally next to Italy and Greece, controlling southern Europe. The constant strategic goal of the USA to keep Russia out of the Mediterranean is on its way out. Currently, the Russian fleet has a naval base in Tartus, Syria. The emergence of another in Tobruk would greatly expand Russia's capabilities in the Middle East. Fifth, and most importantly, 3 countries in the row have a strategic orientation with the BRICS set up. Again, end of petrodollar. Algeria, Libya, and Egypt, which have already entered it. Algeria and Libya can close the entry-exit between the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. Another problem that has arisen is the emergence of a Russian naval base in Sudan on the Red Sea, which will give Moscow permanent access to the Suez Canal, the Indian Ocean, and the Arabian Peninsula. So far, the Americans have managed to contain Sudan, but this will not last long. All documents are signed and can be ratified by the Sudanese parliament at any time. They say this is a huge issue for NATO, U.S., and EU. And it is. This is part of the bigger plan. All these chess moves by all these nations into the Middle East has seen very little impact on Israel's stopping the attacks or allowing these humanitarian corridors to continue. And right now, they're talking about 1 million people are on the verge of starvation, guys, and complete dehydration if something isn't done immediately. Now, Lebanon is firing across their border just like Hezbollah said they would. There's been incoming impacts more and more now into the Tel Aviv and into Israel itself. How far will this go? Guys, it looks like we're definitely dealing with possibly Zechariah 12. And if you look at Zechariah 12 and 13 and 14, the 3 chapters, they're not very long. It talks about 2 battles that I consider 2 battles. Some will say it's 1 battle in Zechariah 12 and in Zechariah 14. But guys, there is a difference there, and I think what we're seeing now is the Zechariah 12 situation possibly. And I say that because, remember, there's going to be these wars and rumors of wars, but the end is not going to come until the desolation appears that Daniel talked about, the abomination of desolation, the false Christ. So the first battle, I think, in Zechariah 12 is what's building up now. Then you're going to see the false one and his group step in, claim to be the saviors of the world. 14, I think, is the battle. When Christ comes back, it's the last battle. Because in Zechariah 12, it continues to say, as God is talking to him, he says, in that day, so and so will happen. But when you get to Zechariah 14, guys, you go there and look at it. Now, I use the King James. It says, not in that day, but in the Lord's day. Notice the difference there. There is that, and I think that's very telling, because the end is the Lord's day. And I think that day is 1,000 years, because a day with the Lord is 1,000 years, and that would include the 1,000-year millennium when that event happens. But I think we're looking at the first war that will bring in the Antichrist. And then, again, 14 is the war that God wins. And it talks about that Jerusalem will become a cup of trembling for the world, and everyone that surrounds it goes against it. And that cup, guys, is the cup of wrath that's going to be poured out. And that's what we're getting ready to see. What we don't know is how intense the powers that be will let this conflict intensify. How far will it go before this false one steps into place? And I think that's exactly where we're at. But I'd love to hear your comments on Zechariah 12 and Zechariah 14. But again, notice 12, God is saying in that day, and 14 on the Lord's day. And that makes a difference to me. We're watching it. You watch it, guys. It's a heads up. Be safe.